The outer bay of Depot 9 smelled like burned coolant and recycled air, the way it always did, the way it always would. Nothing about that day felt different until the ground shook. Rin Saito was 3 meters deep inside a Type 7 freight engine, lying flat on his back when the tremor hit. Tools rattled off the magnetic strip beside him. The overhead light flickered. He waited. Then he slid out, stood up, and looked toward the eastern wall where a long crack had just appeared in the metal paneling. Outside, the alarm was going. Not the slow pulse of a docking error. The fast, ugly kind. Workers were already running past the bay door. Polhari drove in a pair of sulkai with their long fingers pressed over their hearing membranes. All of them heading the same direction, toward the outer platform. Rin wiped his hands on his work cloth and followed at his own pace. The platform opened onto the wide landing field at the edge of the depot. A quarter of it was on fire. Not the fuel fire kind. The dark, slow-burning kind that came from energy systems cracking open. And in the middle of it, collapsed on its side like a building that had fallen, was the largest living thing Run had ever seen. The creature was easily 40 meters from snout to tail. Its scales were the deep gray-green of storm clouds, each one the size of a floor tile. Its wings were folded wrong, one of them shattered at the joint, the broken edge jutting up at an angle that made Ren's jaw tighten just looking at it. Across its left side, below the ribcage, something had torn through the scales, and the wound was open and bleeding. The blood was dark, almost black. It pooled slowly across the platform and steamed faintly where it met the cold ground. Velthary. Ren had only seen images. Everyone in the outer depots knew the name. Dragon class species. Apex rating. Do not approach. Do not make eye contact. Do not engage under any circumstance without guild authorization. The workers had formed a wide circle at a safe distance. Nobody was moving forward. A few had their personal comm devices up, recording or calling for help or both. Hessa, Ren's supervisor, was at the edge of the crowd, her 6 arms all tightly folded against her chest in the Polhari posture that meant she was very frightened and trying not to show it. The dragon was conscious. Its eye, gold and the size of a dinner plate, moved slowly across the crowd. When it tried to lift its head, the wound tore opened slightly more and it made a sound. Not a roar, something lower, a sound like pressure releasing. Nobody moved. Ren stepped forward. Hessa caught his sleeve with 2 of her hands. She had a strong grip for someone her size. Hey, Run, stop. You cannot touch a Velthary without consent clearance. It is a Class 4 political incident. The guild will— He's bleeding, Ren said. I know he is bleeding. That is not the point. Ren looked at the wound, then at the crowd, then at the dragon. He gently removed Hessa's hands from his sleeve and kept walking. The circle of workers parted for him. Not because they wanted to, because nobody knew how to stop him without getting closer to the dragon themselves. He stopped about 3 meters away from the creature's head. The gold eye moved and fixed on him. Up close, the iris had rings inside it, layer like tree growth. The dragon's breath came in long, slow pulls, each one labored. The chest rose and fell. Rose and fell. Run crouched down onto one knee. He looked at the wound the way he looked at broken things. Carefully, without rushing. The tear in the scales ran about 2 meters long, and it was deep. Whatever had hit him had used energy, not metal. The edges of the wound had that fused, scorched look that energy weapons left behind. He reached out slowly and touched the edge of one of the torn scales. Testing the surface. Reading the damage, the dragon growled. It was a sound that moved through Ren's chest like a bass frequency. Several workers behind him took a large step back. Ren didn't move. He looked up at the golden eye and held the gaze for a moment. Then he looked back at the wound. He turned the piece of torn scale over in his fingers, checking the underside. Then he stood up, turned around, and walked back toward the bay. Hessa fell in a step beside him immediately, her voice low and urgent. What are you doing? Where are you going? Ren, I need you to talk to me right now. The authority is going to be here within the hour, and if you have touched a Velthary without getting my kit, Ren said. Duddy walked into the bay, went to his tool locker, and opened it. He pulled out the field repair case from the bottom shelf, the one he used for high-temperature energy couplings. He checked the contents quickly, added 2 items from the medical shelf above the locker, and closed both up. He walked back out to the platform. The crowd had not moved. The dragon had not moved. The black blood was still spreading slowly across the ground, thinning at the edges. Ren walked back through the circle, back across the platform, and knelt down beside the wound. Behind him, the entire depot went quiet. He opened the case and got to work. The depot's night cycle turned the overhead lights amber and dropped the temperature by 4 degrees. Most of the workers had gone back inside after the first hour. A few stayed, watching from the platform doorway, not close enough to be involved, but not able to make themselves leave either. Hessa stayed. She stood 20 meters back and watched with all 3 of her eye sets open, which meant she was too worried to blink. Ren had been working for 2 hours. He had not treated the wound the way a medical unit would. He had no access to Velthary biology packs, no tissue sealant rated for a species this size, no pain compound that would work on a nervous system built for a 40-meter predator. What he had was a field kit built for energy coupling failures, a thermal binder used to seal cracked power conduits, and 2 tubes of high-density sealant that he normally used on pressure fractures and engine walls. He used all of it. The logic was not complicated. The wound was an energy tear. Energy tears in organic tissue behave the same way they did in machine housings. The edges burned, the interior bled, and if you didn't stop the internal pressure from pushing outward, the whole thing got worse fast. Ren treated the torn scale edges like fractured casing panels and the wound bed like a ruptured conduit. He worked layer by layer, slow and careful. The way he always worked, the dragon had not attacked him. It had not moved at all, except to track him with that one gold eye. After the first 20 minutes, it had stopped growling. Ren finished applying the last layer of thermal binder across the upper edge of the wound and sat back on his heels, rolling his shoulders slowly to loosen it. He looked at what he'd done. The bleeding had stopped. The seal wasn't pretty. It would not hold forever, but it would hold. The dragon spoke. The voice was deep and textured like sound coming from inside a cave. The translator node on Ren's collar processed it after a 2-second delay. Why? Ren didn't answer right away. He was checking the lower edge of the seal, pressing lightly with 2 fingers. Why? The dragon said again. Ren looked up. You were bleeding? That is not a reason. Ren thought about that for a moment. Scared things bleed, he said. Hurt things bleed. It needed to stop. A long silence. The gold, I did not move from him. I did not ask for your help. No, Ren agreed. My kind does not accept debt from lesser species. Ren picked up one of his used tools, wiped it clean on his work cloth, and set it back in the case. Okay, he said. The dragon seemed to expect more. When more didn't come, something in the set of its jaw changed. You are not afraid of me. You're too hurt to be dangerous right now, Ren said. He paused, then added honestly, I probably would have been afraid otherwise. That seemed to land differently than an answer about bravery would have. The dragon was quiet for a moment. What species are you? Human. Another pause. Longer this time. I have heard of humans. Most people have, Ren said without any particular feeling about it. He closed the field case and stood up, pressing one hand to his lower back. He was going to feel those 2 hours tomorrow. He looked down at the sealed wound one more time, then up at the dragon's face. The seal will hold through the night. Don't flex the side muscles if you can help it. And don't fly. The wing will need different treatment. I'm not qualified for that part. The dragons, I tracked him steadily. You speak to me as though I am a broken machine. I fix you the same way, Ren said. It worked. He picked up his case and turned to walk back. Behind him, the dragon said something else. The translator node caught it half a second late, right as Ren took his 3rd step. The word it gave him was not a standard word. It flagged it as untranslated, species-specific, and offered a loose approximation, a title, or a recognition marker used internally within Velthary culture. The node couldn't do better than that. Ren kept walking. He'd look it up later. Hessa met him at the platform door. She was holding a comm unit, and her posture made her look like she'd aged 6 years in 2 hours. The authority sent a message, she said quietly. Council Speaker Oren. He's sending a response team. They've been alerted that a Velthary has come down on depot grounds. They nodded slowly. Run, Hessa said. The message also mentioned the Bounty Guild. It said a guild rep is already in transit. Rin stopped walking. He turned and looked back at the dragon. Drakkar had lowered his great head to the platform floor, eyes half closed, breathing slowly and steadily for the first time since he'd crashed. The black blood around him had dried at the edges. The wound was sealed and still. Ren turned back and walked inside. He had a freighter engine to finish by morning, and now apparently a whole other problem coming with the dawn. Did he want to get his tools? They came in during the early shift, when the depot was just waking up and the loading crews were still pulling their gear on. For ships, 3 small, fast enforcement crafts and 1 wide transport with guild markings on the hull in that particular shade of red that meant official business and do not argue with us. Ren heard the docking clamps before anyone else did. He was already in the bay, lying under a different freighter this time, when the vibration of 4 simultaneous dockings moved through the floor. He counted the landings, noted the spacing, and kept working. By the time he came out from under the freighter, Branch Commander Salvok was already on the platform. Salvok was tall for a Drovan, which made him tall by most measures. He wore the gray and red field coat of a senior guild enforcement officer, and he moved through the depot the way guild people always moved through other people's spaces, like the space had already been given to him and everyone else was on borrowed time. His 2 enforcement crews fanned out behind him in the standard spread, each one armed. Hessa was trying to walk beside Salvok and brief him at the same time. He was not listening to her. His attention was already on the outer platform, already on the shape of Drakkar lying in the pale early light, the sealed wound dark against the gray-green scales. Ren set his tool down and followed at a distance. Salvok stopped at the edge of the platform. He looked at Drakkar for a long moment. Then he looked at the wound seal, and something shifted in his expression. He turned to his closest crew member and said something quietly. The crew member's eyes moved until they found Ren. Then they all looked at Ren. Salvok walked over to him. Who authorized medical treatment? Nobody, Ren said. Who did it? Me. Salvok looked at him the way people looked at things that didn't belong where they were. You are depot maintenance. Mechanic, Ren said. You are not licensed to perform biological intervention on a protected class species. I stopped to bleed, Ren said. With sealant. Salvok had the eyes of someone who was very good at deciding what mattered and what didn't. Right now, they were telling him something about Ron that he hadn't decided what to do with yet. He let it go for the moment. He turned back toward Drakkar. Drakkar had been watching Salvok since he walked onto the platform. His head was still on the ground, but the eye that was visible had its inner rings tight and contracted. Ren had already learned that meant something. He didn't know the exact word, but he understood the feeling behind it. These two knew each other. Drakkar of the Velthari 7th Convocation, Salvok said, loud and formal. You are currently listed under active guild warrant for interference with licensed transit operations in Velthari Outer Territory. You are required by Galactic Transit Authority Protocol to submit to containment pending review. Drakkar said nothing. Hessa appeared at Ren's elbow. A small hollow unit projected from her upper left hand. Council Speaker Orin is connected. He wants to observe the handover. On the hollow, Orin's face was the polished, neutral expression of someone who made political problems go away for a living. Commander Salvok, he said, we appreciate your prompt response. Depot 9 is prepared to fully cooperate with Guild authority in this matter. Ren looked at the hollow, then at Salvok, then at Drakkar. He thought about what Salvok had said. Licensed transit operations. Interference. He turned the words over in his head the way he turned an unusual part over in his hands. Looking for where it didn't fit, he looked at Salvok's ships. From here, through the depot's open dock wall, he could see the side of the transport. He looked at the hull markings. He looked at the cargo seal codes stamped near the rear loading door. He read them the way he read everything, quietly, completely, without appearing to do it. His eyes stopped on one of the codes, then moved to a secondary mark near the hinge plate. He looked at both of them together. He went still. Your lead enforcer, Ren said. Salvok turned. The one on your left. His shield generator. Ren did not point. He did not need to. The housing coupling is cracked, probably from docking vibration. If he activates it, it'll destabilize in about 3 minutes and vent back. A silence settled over the platform. Solvok's lead enforcer looked down at his belt unit. He ran a quick manual check. His expression changed. Run waited. The enforcer looked up and gave Solvok a short nod. Run was right. Solvok looked at Run for a long time after that. Not angry. Something more careful than angry. You noticed that from across the platform. I noticed things, Run said, and Oren's voice came from the hollow, a little too even. Commander Solvok, if we could refocus on the matter of, we'll need 20 minutes, Solvok said, and cut the hollow off that he was still looking at Rin. Rin looked back at him. He didn't say anything else. He had bought 20 minutes, and he needed to think. Behind Solvok, on the platform floor, Draker's gold, I had turned toward him. The inner rings were still tight, but they were different now. They were watching. The council room of Depot 9 was not built for important meetings. It had 8 seats, a long table with a scratch along one side, and a hollow projector that hummed at the wrong frequency if you ran it longer than an hour. It was the kind of room where shift schedules got argued over and maintenance budgets got cut. Today, it had Solvok on one side of the table with 2 of his officers. Hessa on the other side, her 6 arms arranged in the rigid posture of someone trying to look more senior than she felt. Oren's face projected large from the hollow at the end of the table. And Run, standing near the door, still in his work clothes, field case leaning against the wall beside him. Oren opened. The situation is straightforward, he said. A Velthari national has landed on Transit Authority property under active guild warrant. Protocol is clear. The individual is to be held pending guild custody transfer. Any interference with this process by depot personnel is a violation of GA Charter Article 9, subsection, what was the convoy? Rin said. Everyone looked at him. Oren blinked. I am sorry. The convoy Draker is accused of interfering with, Rin said. What was it carrying? Solvok's expression did not change. That information is under guild operational seal. Okay, Rin said. He reached into his front pocket and took out a small flat data card. He set it on the table and slid it toward the center. The cargo seal codes on your transport's rear loading door. The secondary mark near the hinge plate. I read them this morning. Nobody spoke. The primary code is a standard guild transit seal, Rin said. But the secondary mark is a Velthari restricted stamp. It's the kind they use on ships that have been through Velthari space under territorial license. The stamp format went out of use 4 years ago, which means your transport ran routes in Velthari territory at least 4 years back under a Velthari-issued license. He paused. Velthari don't give transit licenses to cargo ships. They give them to personnel transports that have been cleared for species transfer. The room was very quiet. Species transfer, one of Solvok's officers said flatly. I can't read the full manifest from a stamp, Rin said. I'm not saying I can, but those 2 codes together on the same hull tell me what kind of ship this is, what kind of work it was built for. He looked at Solvok directly. I fix machines. I know what they're made to carry by how they're put together. That ship is not a freight transport. Oren's voice had dropped in temperature. This is conjecture from a depot technician. He is right, Draker said. The voice came from outside. The council room had a high window that looked onto the outer bay corridor. Draker was not in the corridor, but sound carried, and the depot was not built thick. Every person in the room heard the words clearly. Draker continued, and the translator nodes on every collar in the room worked to keep up with the measured, heavy cadence. The convoy I intercepted 4 months ago carried 31 Velthari juveniles removed from a border settlement by contract agents working under a guild operational license. The guild's official record lists them as unclaimed biological assets transferred under GA Charter Article 14. The hollow flicker of Oren's face showed the first crack in his composure. I destroyed the convoy, Draker said. I returned the juveniles to their settlement. I accept that record fully. I will not argue the guild's paperwork. I will only say what the paperwork calls a cargo, and what my people call those 31 children are 2 different things. A long silence followed. Solvok had not moved. His face was a wall, but his hands, flat on the table, had gone very still in the particular way that meant a person was thinking very hard about a very difficult situation. Hess's upper two hands were pressed over her mouth. Oren's face on the hollow was working through something. Ren could see it. The political calculation. What it cost to proceed versus what it cost to stop. The data card, Oren finally said, would need to be formally submitted to the authorities' review board. This is not a matter that can be decided at depot level. Then submit it, Ren said. He nodded toward the card still sitting in the middle of the table. I read what I read. It's verifiable. Anyone with a hull code registry and basic guild ship history can cross-check it. This will take time, Oren said. Then it takes time, Ren said. He stays until it's done. Salvok looked at him then. Not the calculating look from before. Something different. Something that was almost curiosity. You are a mechanic, he said. You fix engines. This has nothing to do with you. Ren considered that for a moment. He was bleeding my bay, he said. That made it something to do with me. He picked up his field case, walked to the door, and stopped. He looked back at Salvok once more. Your transport's rear stabilizer housing is also cracked on the port side. You probably got it on approach. I'd get that fixed before your return trip. Then he walked out. Behind him, the room stayed silent for a long beat. Then Salvok reached out across the table, picked up the data card, and turned it over slowly in his fingers. The bay was a good place to think. It always had been. The machines didn't care what was happening on the platform or in the council room. They just needed to be fixed. Ren found that useful. He was checking the coupling seals on the freighter's secondary fuel line when he heard footsteps he didn't recognize. Not Hess's gate. Not any of the depot workers he knew. He stayed where he was under the chassis and listened. The steps stopped about a meter from the freighter. You are not easy to find, Salvok said. Ren slid out from under the freighter and sat up. Salvok was standing alone. No officers. His coat was still on, but the formal posture from the council room was slightly looser. He looked like a man who had left a difficult meeting and needed air. Ren waited. Salvok looked around the bay slowly, the way people looked at things they didn't understand and were deciding whether to bother. You made a very dangerous enemy today, he said finally. I know, Ren said. Oren will not forget this. The guild's review board will find the minimum action required to make the data card go away. And I will be reassigned somewhere that reminds me of the cost of situations like this one. I know, Ren said again. Salvok looked at him. You know, and you did it anyway. Yes. Why? Salvok said it the same way Drakkar had 2 nights before, in the dark, with the blood still drying on the platform. The same single word, but from Salvok it came with a different texture. Drakkar had asked it like someone encountering something new. Salvok asked it like someone trying to find the flaw in a plan that didn't seem to have one. Ren thought about it honestly. He picked up a coupling seal from the floor beside him and turned it in his hands. He needed help. I could help. That's all. That is not all, Salvok said. You read my ship's cargo marks from 40 meters in poor light, used a 20-minute equipment problem to delay an official proceeding, and then laid a set of evidence in front of a GA council speaker that took a guild warrant apart at the seams. That is not a man who just helps because someone needs it. That is a man who thinks. Ren considered that. I noticed things, he said. I was always going to notice the marks. Once I noticed them, I was always going to know what they meant. Once I knew what they meant, he paused. He set the coupling seal down. I couldn't unknow it. Most people choose not to act on what they know. I know, Ren said. I'm not most people. Salvok was quiet for a moment. Something moved across his face that was not quite respect and not quite frustration. It was what happened when those two things occupied the same space. The Velthari do not bond with other species, he said. In 400 years of records, there is not a single case of a Velthari forming a formal recognition with a non-Velthari. They consider all other species to be at best temporary contacts and at worst useful nuisances. Okay, Ren said. You are aware he named you. Ren was quiet for a beat. He remembered the word the translator node hadn't been able to process. He had looked it up the night before, going through 3 different linguistic databases before finding a partial entry in an academic paper on Velthari cultural structure. The translation had been rough, and the paper's author had admitted it might be wrong. But the closest they had gotten was something like, one who holds the sky up. I'm aware, Ren said. Salvok studied him. Does that mean anything to you? Probably more than I'll fully understand for a while, Rin said. Salvok nodded slowly. He turned to leave, then stopped. The review board will take 6 weeks minimum. The data card will survive the process. The warrant will be suspended pending inquiry. He will not be taken. He said it without looking back, his voice completely flat. That is my professional assessment. Not a promise. I didn't ask for one, Run said. Salvok walked out. Rin sat in the bay for a while after that. Then he heard something from the direction of the platform corridor. A slow, rhythmic sound. Large weight moving carefully. He got up and walked to the bay door. Dracker was in the corridor. He had moved from the outer platform for the first time since crashing, pulling himself carefully along the wide freight corridor on 3 working limbs, favoring the sealed side. He was big enough that even in the freight corridor, there was not much space left over. He stopped when he saw Run. They looked at each other in the corridor light. You heard all of that, Rin said. Sound carries in your depot, Dracker said. Rin nodded. He leaned against the doorframe. You should be still. The seal is holding, but the muscle underneath needs time. I'm aware, Dracker said. I wanted to see. See what? Dracker looked at him for a long moment. Whether you were the same without an audience. Rin thought about that. Was I? Yes, Dracker said simply. He turned and began the slow process of moving back toward the platform. Rin watched him go. He went back to the freighter. The coupling seals weren't going to check themselves. 17 days after the guild ships left, a message arrived at Depot 9 that crashed the comm system for 6 minutes because the encryption layer was so old and so complex that the Depot software didn't know how to open it without choking. Hessa spent those 6 minutes making a sound that Run had never heard a Polhari make before. When a message finally decoded and she read it, she made a different sound. Quieter. She stood very still for a moment and then walked directly to the outer bay where Run was. He was on his back under the same freighter he'd been fixing the morning Dracker crashed. He had finally gotten to the secondary fuel couplings. Hessa crouched beside the freighter. Fein. I'm Busse. Fein. She set her comm unit on the floor beside his shoulder so he could see the screen from where he was lying. Read this. He read it. He read it a second time. He slid out from under the freighter, sat up, and read it a third time, standing up. That IT was from the Velthri High Convocation. Sormalsel. 7 authenticator marks. In the 400 years that the Velthri Convocation had maintained records of their external communications, they had never sent a direct formal message to a human individual. The database entry that confirmed this was 2 lines long in the message header, and it sat there very quietly, making the rest of the message feel heavier. The message itself was not long. It named Run by his full name, which it had somehow gotten completely correct, including the family name order. It confirmed that the title given to him by Dracker of the 7th Convocation had been formally registered in Velthri record on the day it was given. It noted that this was the first time the title had been given to a non-Velthri. It informed him that the Velthri High Convocation, in consequence of recent events, was initiating a formal request for dialogue with human territorial representatives, for the first time in recorded history. The message did not explain why. It did not need to. The last line said, "The one who holds the sky up does not need to understand the sky to hold it." Rin set the comm unit down on the tool shelf. Outside, the depot was loud in a way it hadn't been for weeks. Journalists had been coming through since word of the Guild Review got out. Political representatives from 3 different mid-territory councils had sent inquiries. Hessa's comm had stopped having quiet moments. The depot's transit numbers had somehow tripled because apparently every ship in the outer corridor wanted to pass through the station where that thing had happened, even if they weren't sure exactly what thing it was. Rin found Dracker on the outer platform. The Dragon had been doing this every few days, moving out of the freight bay and into the open air, testing the healed side carefully. The wing was being treated by a Velthri medical specialist who had arrived quietly a week ago, a smaller and older dragon who worked without speaking and left again each time without saying where she went. The wing was coming along. Dracker was sitting with his head raised, looking up at the sky. The light hit his scales and pulled out colors that weren't visible in the bay. Rin stood beside him and also looked up for a moment. "You saw the message," Dracker said. He did not ask it as a question. Yes, the convocation does not make decisions quickly. What they have started will take years to become anything real. I know, Rin said. It is possible it will go nowhere. Diplomacy between species with 4 centuries of distance between them rarely moves fast or cleanly. I know that too. Dracker looked down at him. The gold I had lost none of its weight, but it was different now than it had been in the first days. The inner rings were loose. Does any of that concern you? Rin thought about it honestly. No, he said. I didn't do any of it for the result. I did it because it was in front of me. Dracker was quiet. The wind moved across the platform. Far out, past the landing field, a line of incoming ships was visible in the upper atmosphere, catching light on their hulls. Among them, barely visible at this distance, one shape was much larger and slower and different from all the others. It was moving with intention toward a vector that, if extended, would end somewhere in the direction of human territorial space, the Velthary diplomatic vessel. It had been holding in orbit for 3 days. Now, it was moving. Rin watched it for a while. Dracker said, "My people have a belief that history is not made by the loudest moment or the largest force. It is made by the first movement, by the one who moves before it is safe to move." He paused. We have spent 400 years watching the galaxy become something we no longer recognized. We needed someone to move first. I just stopped to bleed, Rin said. Yes, Dracker said. You did. There was nothing to add to that. They stood together in the open air and watched the Velthary ship trace its slow, deliberate arc toward a meeting that 400 years hadn't managed to produce. Behind them, inside the depot, Hessa was managing 17 incoming comm requests, and the depot systems were running at a pace they had not run at in years. Rin looked at the ship until it faded into the high atmosphere. Then he turned and walked back into the bay. He had a freighter to finish. He always had a freighter to finish. That, too, was the whole story.